it is Sunday, the 16th of August, and this is your national weather update for the week, as well as your seasonal outlook at the forecast for sort of spring, as well as a little bit of a check-in with climate drivers. So we'll start off with our forecast and then we'll go into our long-term stuff. So this week, it's mainly very active weather down in the southeast, but it starts out nice and dry. So this satellite image shows you sort of this cold pool of air that moved through last week and is now settled over the Tasman. We have high pressure systems sitting here over here in the southeast, some mid-level development of cloud here in the interior, and another high in the west, leading to some fairly clear weather before this next front moves through on Monday. Let's have a look at the current weather warnings that are in place. We have some coastal wind warnings up here in Queensland, dangerous or hazardous surf down in New South Wales as we have an onshore flow there, and then there's some minor flood warning in northern Victoria after the very intense rainfall that we saw last week. This will dissipate over the first few days and then return as some rain comes in. So let's have a very quick look day by day about what's happening across the country. So starting off here on Sunday, this is that beautiful cloud deck that we just saw on the satellite image. We have some onshore rainfall over the sort of east coast and then dry along WA and Victoria and Tassie. Similar setup for Monday. A front now moves through in WA. This mid-level trough starts to develop and we continue to get onshore rainfall in New South Wales and Queensland. This continues for Tuesday. WA starts to dry out. This trough starts to intensify and a front is starting to move through to connect with that trough on Wednesday. That delivers quite a bit of rainfall for Western Victoria and Northwest Tasmania, but it's really Thursday where a lot of that rain starts to fall. Again, in those same areas that had intense rainfall last week. So this is where I could definitely see some flood warnings to continue to come back. We also see this though extend through large parts of the southeast in East and South Australia, in sort of southern New South Wales, and as well as in northern Tasmania. Friday, the system moves over a little bit, delivering rainfalls, another mid-level trough up here in the sort of central regions. Saturday, it starts to clear out as this high pressure starts to dominate and take place. And then at Sunday, there's a potential next front moving in for WA. So that's the rainfall, that's the story of the week. I haven't seen any particularly extreme temperatures in the hot or the cold, but there's definitely fog likely along a lot of the areas that experienced rainfall last week. We've got some moist soils, we've got some calm winds, and some cool temperatures in the morning, but not frosty. So definitely some fog is likely on the way. Cool. So that's what's happening this week. This is the rainfall accumulation. As you can see, this is the signature of that front and trough in the southeast. This is the signature of that Monday front in WA. And then this is that onshore rainfall across the east coast. Let's have a look now into the long range forecast. We are looking here at the chance of exceeding median rainfall for September 2026. There is a very low chance that we'll exceed that median rainfall. That's not surprising. We are going into an El Nino. We have seen this drying trend sort of really starting to continue across this winter. So yeah, I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone here, but I don't particularly love looking at this outlook for rainfall. I think it can sometimes be a bit misleading. You know, you might see a pocket like this where there's a really high chance of exceeding median rainfall. Because in September there's not a lot of rainfall up here, it might be the difference between experiencing 3 mils of rain versus 4 mils of rain. Whereas down in the southeast, because we have much more variability, you know, we don't really see that same signature. So instead, we're going to look at the rainfall percentage chance scenario. So 75% chance scenario means it's more likely than not that this is sort of the rainfall that we'll see in terms of accumulation. Down in the south, it's largely sort of between sort of 10 and maybe 50 mils, 10 really up into New South Wales here, WA as well, and then Tassie a little bit more. And then if we look at the 25% chance scenario, so this is less likely to happen than not. It's really similar patterns. And honestly, it's not that much extra rainfall. So what that's showing me is that the models are fairly consistently saying that there's not a lot of rainfall on the way. So that's what I'm getting from this September outlook. I'm now going to switch to the first 3 months, which is September to November, so our spring rainfall. And I'm going to go back to this percentage chance above median, just to show you this likely chance, again, is just the difference between a few millimeters. It's not that much. Whereas because of the variability down here, there's obviously a lot more mils to sort of play in. But again, it's showing that really strong signature that the southeast is unlikely to exceed the median rainfall. So it's unlikely to have more rainfall than usual. I hope that makes sense. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the same amount or more or less. It's just saying the chance of actually getting more than it is pretty low, but we could still get the median rainfall. That's I suppose what this is really communicating. Let's quickly go to 50% chance scenario for rainfall for the first 3 months though, and we can still see there's just not a lot on the way. Sort of 100 to 200 mils is possible along the east coast here, and along the very southwestern coast there, but yeah, not much rain there. Okay, let's, I suppose, actually move on to why that might be. Actually, before we do that, we'll quickly check in with how the rainfall is looking at the moment. So this is the July rainfall, and it's just to show we still have a very, very, very dry southwestern Australia, and along the east coast it's super dry as well. If I take that into 3 months, so we're looking at May to July, so sort of our late autumn into winter rainfall, we still see that dry signature up in the east coast areas as well. And again, the southwest is really dry at the moment. We're just not seeing the rain really get there. And then there's definitely been a lot of rain up in the alpine regions, up in Victoria, but not as much snowfall. So it's been a fairly poor snow season there. Okay, let's now head into climate drivers and let's do a check-in. So the Southern Oscillation Index is often a decent indicator of how El Nino is hitting Australia. It's not an actual measure of El Nino, but it often is a good indicator of how El Nino is starting to affect Australia. And we can see we had this very, very steep decline, but this week we've started to see an incline. Now, I would wait a little bit to see how this Southern Oscillation Index continues to progress, to see if it continues to rise or not. As you can see, it bounces around quite a bit. But yeah, before we get our hopes up that this means that the El Nino isn't intensifying, I would definitely wait, because out of the models that I'm seeing, so this is the ECMWF model, we're continuing to see that it's going to intensify. If I go onto this outlook for ENSO, this is multiple models. We still have quite a lot of models showing that it will intensify, although this new USA PSL model is showing that it will maybe stay, sort of at the level that we're at now, which is still a pretty strong El Nino. So yeah, let's definitely be checking in on that next week to see how it continues to progress. The seasonal forecasts as well often get a little bit better towards the end of the month, just the way that some sort of sneaky background stuff happens, I suppose. But yeah, the seasonal forecasts tend to get a little, slightly more accurate towards the end of the month. So we'll definitely check in next week to see how that's progressing. Indian Ocean dipole continues to remain really split. You can see last week, I suppose, we hit this tipping point of a positive IOD. And the Australian model is showing that it will sort of remain positive, whereas the Japanese model is showing that it might go back to neutral. But this is probably actually the most signal that we've seen in a while that the IOD is trending towards some sort of state of it being positive. And a positive IOD also means a drier Australia as well. The Southern Annular Mode is sort of continuing to really bounce around this neutral phase, which is Probably pretty good. We were in a very positive phase this winter, which is why a lot of the fronts really didn't make their way up into the mainland. Whereas you've seen, like the past few weeks, we've actually started to get those fronts moving across and delivering some rainfall. And that's because we've sort of tended back, into this maybe negative or sort of neutral phase. So they're starting to be able to make their way a little bit further up in terms of latitude. And then just finally, Matt and Julian oscillation. We're in pretty much a neutral state at the moment, heading into wetter, but as you can see, it's really quite close to this circle, which means the strength is really quite weak. So, it says a weaker phase of the MJO, but I really wouldn't expect anything there to be really that much wetter, or even when it gets drier, that much drier. It's really staying quite close to home there. So yeah, we wouldn't really expect anything there. Okay, that is it, I suppose, for this week's seasonal outlook. We've had a look at the spring rainfall, and it's looking continually dry again there as well. Do stay safe. Have a great week. If you have any questions that you'd like answered next time, reach out and let us know, and we'll do the best that we can. Have a great one. Bye.